Mike, I think you're live.
Susan, we're ready to go. We're running. Bienvenidos, estimados todos. Gracias. Thank you all for joining us tonight for this historic event. A really, truly unprecedented coming together of Latino organizations due to an unprecedented time, which we're all going to be talking about. You're going to be party to spending some time with some really famous and familiar faces from throughout the various communities and constituencies of our diverse Latino community. I'm so excited for this event, not only because of the people who are going to be behind it, but because of all of you and the efforts that you will be engaged in over the course of the next 34, 35 days that will have an impact and change the course of this country and of history. I don't think it's an understatement at all to recognize that Latinos, probably for the very first time, we've been saying it for years, will have a direct impact on who the next president of the United States will be. My name is Mike Madrid, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, and I've been working hand in glove with many of the people that will be visiting with us today. The truth of the matter is, in many instances, I've also worked on the opposite side of the aisle with other people that are going to be presenting today. And that's part of the excitement of what we're going to be engaged in. Because again, the threat that the community faces transcends party. It transcends labels. It transcends the countries of our origin, and it transcends virtually every aspect of the various diverse communities that make up the Hispanic community here in the United States. The goal is to focus on removing Donald Trump from office. I don't need to tell you why, but you are going to hear some of the policy prescriptions, some of the opportunities that are presented for us this year, and of course, some of the failures. So without further ado, I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing from a creative aspect. A lot of you have reached out to us and discussed or asked the question, what kind of advertisements to the various communities are you going to be engaged in employing as a Lincoln Project? We're going to show some of those tonight. We're also going to show some of the media and creative that is being done by our partnering organizations. I want you to use the hashtag Unidos contra Trump throughout the course of this, because if it's not on a hashtag, it didn't actually happen. So let's make sure that as we're communicating and you're live tweeting, engaging people to join into this discussion, because the impact of what we're able to do within our communities is truly going to be determinative in who is going to be sitting in the White House next January. Before we get running with the show, I also want to mention that for more information, for volunteer activity, and how you can get more engaged, visit us at lincolnproject.us or visit the websites of Mi Familia Vota or UnidosUS to engage with any constituency, any organization that you're most comfortable with. If you have a particular skill set, a particular community that you're engaged in and are from, we'll find the right place for you. The stakes are just too high to have it any other way. So without any further ado, I want to introduce a very good friend of mine, somebody I've known for 25 or so years. We're going to hear from a gentleman by the name of Lionel Sosa, a Texan and former senior media consultant for Presidents Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, a fellow at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University, and a member of the Lincoln Project Hispanic Steering Committee.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight is a very historic evening because for the very first time in history, Latino Republicans, Independents, and Democrats are all coming together for one purpose, and that's to defeat Donald Trump in November. There are 35 million registered Latino voters in the United States, so we have the power. We have the power to elect another president of the United States. Let's start it tonight, and let's make it happen.
Thank you, Lionel. And up next is another media consultant by the name of Cesar Martinez, another dear friend who worked on the campaigns of George W. Bush, John McCain, Mitt Romney, and Jeb Bush. Moreover, Cesar is well known throughout Latin America, involved and politically engaged, and has been for dozens of years. So without further ado, let's hear from Cesar Martinez.
Buenas noches y bienvenidos a este histórico foro donde unimos las voces de todos los latinos a través del país para mandar un mensaje claro y contundente. No queremos que Donald Trump repita como presidente. Él no ha atendido bien a la comunidad latina, no ha atendido bien la crisis de la pandemia, no ha atendido bien al país, nos ha dividido. Necesitamos volver a unirnos. Por eso hoy decimos claro y fuerte, estamos unidos contra Trump.
Gracias, Cesar. And now, for our first live panel, three phenomenal women who have been leaders in the Latino and Latina community for most of their adult lives and all of their careers. I want to introduce our first panel and panelists to discuss the topics of respect, inclusion, and the impacts of COVID-19 on our communities. Our first person that I'd like to introduce is Janet Murguia, the president and CEO of UnidosUS and a former deputy campaign manager and director of constituency outreach for the Gore-Lieberman presidential campaign. Janet, thank you for making the time. Thank you. I'd also like to introduce Rosario Marin, the former treasurer of the United States under President George W. Bush, the first foreign-born U.S. treasurer, and the highest-ranking Latina to serve in the Bush administration. Rosario, thank you. Are you with us there?
Yep, I am so delighted to be here with you all.
Thank you, Rosario. And finally, a good friend and well-known commentator, Maria Cardona, who led the New Democrat Network's outreach initiative with the Hispanics nationwide as a senior vice president. She is a principal at the Dewey Square Group, leading the multicultural and public affairs practice. Thank you, Maria, for joining us tonight. You'll also recognize she's regularly on CNN and CNN Español. Lo siento, I'm sorry. Maria.
Mike, thank you so much. Es un honor estar aquí con ustedes.
So glad that you're with us. So first of all, to get us started, can you all react to how Trump talks about the Latino community? We saw a few examples of what he said in the Trump No Nos Quiere video. We're actually going to see in just a few minutes the Trump's No Nos Quiere video, some of that creative. But Maria, if you could start us off and talk a little bit about the tone and the tenor of what we have been hearing and how that impacts the daily lives of Latinos throughout the country.
Mike, again, thank you so much for this forum. It is such an incredibly important time. And literally, this next election is existential, especially for the Latino community. From the moment that Donald Trump announced his presidential campaign in 2015, he started attacking Latinos and immigrants, calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, putting us all in the same bucket as MS-13 gang members. He even put policies in place that demonstrated and illustrated his disdain for our community, literally ripping babies from the arms of their mothers as they were coming to the southern border in search of a better life because they were facing certain death back home in Central America. And so throughout it all, it has had a devastating effect on our communities, on our children, Latino children all across the country, even those whose families have been here since before this was the United States of America, have been bullied, have been told to go back to Mexico, have been told that they're going to be deported, have been told that they're going to call ICE on them. And so this is not the kind of country that my parents brought us over from Colombia when I was 2 years old to live in. Last night, I got an email from my father that made me cry. He said, "Mijita, ¿qué es este desastre? Se me salieron las lágrimas viendo ese pedazo," I'm going to say it because it's just pedazo de mierda que vimos en ese escenario. Eso no es un presidente de Estados Unidos. Por favor, ayúdanos a hacer algo. So we all have to help our Latino families and the Latino community change things. As Lionel said, there are going to be 35 million eligible voters this November. Latinos can make the difference. Let's take our destiny into our own hands and let's be the architect of our own future.
Maria, thank you so much. You're such a passionate advocate for our community, and you just paraphrased it so perfectly and so well. And I think, again, we saw so much of this challenge front row and center last night. So thank you for bringing that home and bringing that point back to what it exactly means to all of us, regardless of how far removed from our own naturalization, our own family's experience as immigrants. It is truly something that crosses generations. I want to show a video right now that is entitled Trump no nos quiere. It's one of the ads that will be running in Florida, Arizona, and I believe in Texas. But if you could reel up that video, we'll go ahead and kind of characterize exactly what Maria was just telling us on video.
Today, with this proclamation, we're reminding our fellow citizens that our Hispanic heritage is something of which all Americans can be proud.
As president, I'll have a lot of reasons to help Hispanics everywhere, because I'll not only be answering to my grandchildren, I'll be answering to history.
I am proud that we have succeeded in appointing more Hispanics to the federal bench than any administration in history.
We can all learn from the strength, solidarity, and values of Latinos.
That's how we've always made this country great, not by building walls, but by tearing down barriers to opportunity.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Este hombre no es como los presidentes que conocíamos y en los que confiábamos. En lugar de respeto, nos insulta.
These aren't people. These are animals.
En lugar de incluirnos, nos excluye.
It's an invasion.
En lugar de compasión, nos desprecia.
There's no...
Este hombre no está haciendo más grande a nuestro país, especialmente para los latinos, porque nos considera ciudadanos de segunda clase.
It's an invasion.
The Lincoln Project es responsable por el contenido de este mensaje.
Let me thank you again for the ad, and let me talk a little bit about Rosario and Janet. I'm going to bring both of you in on this, because while you have both served and worked for different administrations, you enjoy a friendship which is obvious and palpable when you see the both of you. And I want you to talk about, if you wouldn't mind, help us understand how important Latino voices were in both the Clinton and Bush administrations, how Americans are impacted by the lack of Latino voices in the Trump White House, and really speak to the tone and tenor of what presidents were before this administration in terms of engaging the Latino community. Rosario, why don't you get us started off?
Thank you, Mike. And, you know, I was looking at all of those videos, all of the presidents, and whether you agree or disagree with the policies of any particular president, you could tell they care about us. You could feel it. And then you have the current president. I had the privilege of working for a president who didn't have to learn about the Hispanic community because he lived with them. They were his nephews, his sister-in-law. We didn't have to teach him. We didn't have to do outreach. He was the governor of Texas before he was the president. And he brought in so many Latinos because he wanted his cabinet to be representative of America. I was very privileged. Today, we know that there are no voices. Actually, there are no voices, period. Forget about Latinos. There are no African Americans, Asian Americans. There are no Latinos except one voice in that cabinet, and that's his. And what the impact is, those people around the cabinet that raise their hand to say that it is okay to separate families, what Maria was talking about, that just brings me chills. I couldn't even think that President Bush, for any that matter, for any president, would have had a cabinet that would raise their hat and say it was okay to separate our families and to rip children from their lactating mothers. That is so beyond. And that's why I'm so pleased to work with Maria and to work with Janet, people that have been on the opposite side. And we have debated the issues. And while we may not agree on some issues, we agree on one thing, Mike. This guy doesn't respect us. He doesn't care about us. And you know what? Let's return the favor. We don't care about him. We are not going to get him. And we are going to do everything we can to get him out.
Wow,
Yeah.
Rosario, thank you. Janet Murguia, please, your thoughts.
Sure.
Well, first of all, I'm so proud to have Lionel Sosa on my board. As you all know, he's just an artist, but he's so true to his values. And I'm seeing here on this screen tonight, everyone who is putting our community and our country first. We are true to our values. And we see in President Trump right now, someone who is in violent opposition to the values that we care about as a community. I remember in 2016, and even today, Trump is asking the Latino community to vote for him because he asked, what do you have to lose? Well, let me answer that question very clearly with specifics. We've lost our health care. The uninsured in our community, numbers have gone back up after years of decline because, as Rosario points out, as Maria points out, representation matters. When you see our voices and our community represented in administrations, they're not just there to sit at the table, they're participants, and policies flow from these in this engagement. So we've lost our healthcare. Trump asked, what do we have to lose? We've lost our jobs. The unemployment rate for Hispanics, even today, is at 11% higher than any other community in the country. We've lost our income and our businesses. According to a poll that we co-sponsored with Somos, more than 60% of our community has lost a job, significant income, or a business under this administration, and now as a result of COVID. We've lost our families. Trump's policies of family separations, not only at the border, but because of his extreme enforcement policies, where we have 6 million US Latino, US citizen children at risk of losing a parent due to deportation. We've lost respect and our truth at the hands of the highest office in the land. How many times do we have to sit and hear Trump demean, demonize, use rhetoric from day one, as Maria pointed out, that is bolstering misinformation and information that goes unchecked? We've lost our right to vote. We've seen only efforts to subvert the electoral process. We've lost our lives due to a pandemic that has disproportionately impacted our community and African Americans. Hispanics are 2 to 3 more times as likely to get coronavirus because we're represented as essential workers, but yet we've not benefited from the protections in the healthcare system or from the resources that have been invested in the stimulus package. We need to remind people that we've also lost our lives because remember El Paso, the kind of hate and rhetoric that Trump traffics in have consequences. Words have consequences. And we've seen deadly consequences when the very shooter himself, who traveled 600 miles across the state, said he was inspired to do so because of his manifesto quoting Trump wanting to resist a Hispanic invasion. We've seen all the reasons why we cannot afford to vote for Trump. And if we need more evidence, I'm afraid that we're only going to see continued destruction of our community. So for me, let's answer Trump's question. Let's vote on election day. Let's vote for our country and the future that we want for our children and our grandchildren. And remember, this year, it's not just political. This is personal. We've never been attacked in a way where we've seen the impact on us so personally. And remember, we're not just voting against Trump. We have to get him out of office, but we're voting for the future that we want for ourselves and a chance to rebuild in this particular devastating environment. I'm so proud to be here with all of you tonight.
Janet, I'm so proud of all of you. I've got to say, these are very volatile and very unstable times, but to hear from the three of you, powerful women who give us not only their passion, but the consistency in the fight it gives you comfort knowing that there are leaders who are leading this charge. And so I want to thank you. I do want to talk. You did mention the danger of COVID and the impact on our community. And you mentioned that we refer to our people oftentimes as essential workers, but this administration does not treat us like essential human beings. I want to turn for a moment to the impact that COVID-19 has had on the Latino community. But before we dive in, I want to take a look at a video from a Latina business owner who's been impacted by that pandemic. Let's roll the video.
The worst part about this is that Trump could have been honest with us. He could have been honest with the American people, and he could have saved lives. Hi, my name is Melissa, and I am a Latina, Cuban American from Miami, Florida. I am also a mother of 5 children, and I am a business owner as well, whose business is minority owned and whose employees are majority minority as well. And unfortunately, COVID-19 has had a tremendous impact on me and on my community, of course. On a personal level, unfortunately, I had to furlough several team members who are more like family than they are employees, and it was gut-wrenching and heart-wrenching to have to do that. And I thought that this was going to be a more temporary situation, and it feels as if it's become much more permanent of a situation. And I firmly believe that Trump's horrible and terrible mismanagement of COVID 100% has exacerbated this entire situation. And, truthfully, I feel like one of the lucky ones because fortunately, I haven't lost anyone in my immediate circle or family from COVID, but I do know many people, especially in the Hispanic community, that have lost loved ones. And I just can't imagine the pain that they must be feeling. And the worst part about this is that Trump could have been honest with us. He could have been honest with the American people, and he could have saved lives. He could have saved a lot of lives and could have saved people from so much unnecessary suffering. But we know the truth, and we see it clear as day, and we will vote on November 3rd based on the truth. And that vote will not be for Trump. I pray for the future of my 5 children and for the future of this country that Trump is not elected for another 4 years.
Janet, can I go back to Janet real quickly because you spoke so eloquently about COVID earlier, and just talk to us and give us a brief review of just how devastating COVID-19 has been on our Latino community.
Yeah, one of the statistics I wanted to point out, in addition to our community being 2 or 3 times more likely to contract the virus than others, because we are uninsured or underinsured and have had a lack of access to healthcare, because we're also on the front lines, putting our lives on the line, we're exposed to the virus at a higher rate. We're overrepresented in what they call the farm to fork industries. So whether it's in the fields, at the meat packing plants, in the stores stocking shelves, or as your deliveries come in, we are overrepresented. And each one of those, one of the things we learned in those industries, only 16% of our community can do work from home. The vast majority of our community are in families, and sometimes they're in mixed status families where they're putting their lives on the line, and yet we're seeing very little assistance. And if anything, pushing people outside of the ability to receive assistance when it comes to some of those recoveries. Latino children, just so you know, under the age of 18, if they get COVID, we've seen that we represent 45% of the deaths of COVID that have occurred in children. This is a president who has been completely derelict and irresponsible in responding to this pandemic. And our community has paid one of the highest prices as we've seen his dereliction of duty and abject failure of leadership. It's completely unacceptable. And we need to remember that as we think about what we can do to change the course of this country. We have to vote, and we have to use and exercise that right to vote. And we need to hold those individuals accountable. And he's the number one person that we need to hold accountable.
Janet, thank you. I'm going to switch now to the impact that we as a community can have on elections. I'm going to show another video briefly, another one that will be running throughout Florida and the Sun Belt states. It's called Le Criemos.
Todos sabemos que el coronavirus es letal, aún más letal para los latinos. Trump supo de lo peligroso que es desde enero.
It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
It's a little like the regular flu that we have flu shots for.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Y aún así, aún no tenemos un plan nacional para cómo combatirlo, cómo cuidarnos.
Florida volvió a romper su propio récord de contagios con 9,885 casos registrados en un solo día.
Le creímos y nuestros seres queridos murieron solos. Le creímos y nuestra gente perdió sus trabajos. Le creímos y muchos de nuestros pequeños negocios cerraron. Le creímos y muchos de nosotros perdimos nuestros hogares. Le creímos y todavía no podemos enviar a nuestros hijos a la escuela de una forma segura. Le creímos y no nos sentimos seguros. ¿Cuánto tiempo más debemos confiar en alguien que nos miente y que no está preparado para una crisis de este tamaño?
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is.
Hay que ser realistas. Debemos votar con la razón. Debemos votar por Biden en noviembre. The Lincoln Project es responsable por el contenido de este mensaje.
Tremendous ad, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maria, quickly, if you could bring us home and talking about the impact that the Latino vote can have on this election as we move past this and on to the next panel. I want to give you a few moments to talk about how important it is that people show up and engage in what's at stake this election.
Yes, thank you, Mike. As you know, I had the privilege of hosting my own show on El Rey Network for the past month and a half, a 39-episode series that literally focused on how important the Latino vote was. I was honored to have Janet on my show, and I had so many of our allies on the show. And it was essentially geared toward those Latinos who might think, hey, you know what? I don't think my vote really counts. I'm so busy. You know, a lot of our families and communities are trying to make ends meet, going to 2 or 3 jobs. And, you know, many times neither party has really made the case for why Latinos need to go vote. I think this time around is so different. And everyone here tonight has really hit the nail on the head. This is literally a case of life and death for our community. Not only that, more than any other time, our community can make the difference. We will be the largest non-white voting bloc in the country this November. In Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan alone, Mike, Donald Trump won by 66,000 votes, and there are more than 1 million eligible Latinos in those 3 states that can swing this election to Biden. In Florida, we are so much bigger than the tiny margin that Donald Trump won by. Latinos can swing this election. Can we talk about Texas? If we get close in Texas, if we are able to flip Texas, and this is a real reality if all Latinos can come out and vote. Not even all. If we were able to increase our margins 15 to 20%, it would be game over, and Donald Trump would not have a chance in the world to make it. And so again, I implore every single Latino, Latina, their families, their friends, to, in a way that they have never before understood, to understand the kind of power that they have. Su voto es su voz. And if not for ourselves, let's vote for our families, for our communities, for the dreamers who are out there, and Hector and Janet and so many others that are on this call can talk about this. The dreamers are going door to door, even in this pandemic, at a socially responsible distance, but they are going door to door asking people to go vote because they can't vote themselves, because this president has not found it important enough to give the dreamers a pathway to citizenship. People and kids and part of our communities who are American in every single way that counts, except for that piece of paper. They have contributed to our communities. They have made us better as a country, the way all of our Latino communities have. And so I just want to speak to any Latino or Latina. I am literally going to tell them to call me on my phone if they ever believe that their vote does not count. 202-379-8341. Call me and I will convince you. I will get you a ride to the polls. I will get a ballot for you to be mailed. Anything you want and need, anything your family wants and needs, there are resources. The DNC and the Biden campaign have a website, iwillvote.com, voyavotar.com, that gives you the resources necessary to make sure that you are able to exercise this most precious of rights. Because guess what? As Janet said, our lives depend on it.
Yeah. If I may just add, Mike,
yeah,
the famous quote, if not now, when? And if not us.
Yeah.
I want to, on that note, I want to thank, again, these very inspirational women. If anybody doubts that there isn't an advantage here in our community, you were not paying attention to the passion and the fierceness of these three Latinas. The future is Latina and women will lead us. I'm absolutely convinced, especially after this panel. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Rosario. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I hope you'll stick around, maybe answer some questions later, but I appreciate everything that you're doing on behalf of the community.
Muchas gracias, Mike. Un placer.
Thank you.
Gracias.
We're going to move on now and talk specifically about Puerto Rico. We're going to talk about getting the ball rolling with this community. And I want to take a look at an ad first before we begin that discussion with our next panel on how the Trump administration has treated our brothers and sisters from Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, el paraíso tropical, donde viven más de 3,5 millones de ciudadanos americanos. Hoy es diferente. 2 huracanes, uno tras otro, devastaron la isla. Mataron a miles de personas y dejaron a decenas de miles sin comida, luz o agua durante meses. La respuesta del presidente Trump: mentiras y faltas de respeto. Durante su corto viaje a la isla, todo lo que Trump hizo fue tirar papel toalla y repartir latas de pescado. ¿Verdadera ayuda? De ninguna manera. Y después de que 10 terremotos sacudieron a Puerto Rico en solo 6 días, dejando a 8,000 personas sin hogar, Trump detuvo miles de millones de dólares en ayuda de emergencia a nuestra isla.
We did a fantastic job in Puerto Rico. Most of the people in Puerto Rico really appreciate what we've done.
Estoy en shock, no me creo lo que está pasando ni lo que va a pasar, de que vamos a estar sin luz y sin agua por tanto tiempo.
We did a fantastic job in Puerto Rico.
Después empezó a agregarle insultos a sus mentiras.
I hate to tell you, Puerto Rico, but you've thrown our budget a little out of whack.
Algunos piensan que las acciones de Trump son faltas de sensibilidad. Otros dicen que es racismo. Nosotros tenemos claro que es una falta de respeto. Los votantes puertorriqueños están diciendo: hasta la vista, Trump, no volverás. The Lincoln Project es responsable por el contenido de este mensaje.
Just so everybody's aware, that ad has been running for the better part of 4 or 5 weeks, not only on the I-4 corridor in Florida, but it's also been running in the island of Puerto Rico at the same time, communicating in a way that families who have left the island after Hurricane Maria, obviously, nobody leaves under duress from where they want to be, but that's where we find ourselves with no help from the current administration. A quick reminder, if you're watching and following along with us, use the hashtag Unidos contra Trump to be a part of the conversation. Joining me now, we have Rafael Collazo, the Director of Political Campaigns for the UnidosUS Department of Legislative and Political Affairs, as well as Dr. Roberto de la Cruz, the Chief Medical Officer at the Parkland Hospital System in Dallas-Fort Worth. He has served on the board of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute and the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, and as a fellow for the Center of National Policy. In 2017, Dr. de la Cruz visited Puerto Rico to see the destruction caused by Hurricane Maria and took a 2-month leave from Parkland to work with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services on the island to assist in the recovery effort. Welcome, Dr. de la Cruz and Rafael Collazo. Let me first start by asking a question about the ad we just watched. Rafael, can you talk about the Trump administration's response to the recent natural disasters in Puerto Rico?
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to thank you, Mike, and Marco, and the rest of the Lincoln Project team for this clarion call, bringing Latino leaders from all political stripes together, because as we know, there's so much more that unites us than divides us. Truly unidos, and in this case, unidos contra Trump. When I reflect on that video, I think it's very personal, as our president CEO just shared a moment ago, thinking about my family members that were affected, thinking about an island and 8 million U.S. citizens that have been part of this country for over 120 years, many of which, including two of both my abuelos, who served proudly in the U.S. military, fighting for us in world wars. And so just thinking about comparing that reality of the great benefit that the Puerto Rican community makes to the Latino community, to our great nation of both countries, essentially, that thinking about justification of President Trump's criminally negligent response to the federal disaster relief, and then to top it off, that historic moment that'll live in infamy, when at a time when literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans on the island were homeless, in severe medical danger, and in severe food insecurity, his lack of care, lack of respeto for our community leads to him flippantly tossing paper towels. This indeed is a clarion call for all Latinos, but this is such an acute issue for the Puerto Rican community, not only continuing on the island, which has incredible challenges that the federal government continues not to respond to, but the millions of Puerto Ricans across the country in all 50 states that can indeed make the difference in this election.
Dr. de la Cruz, can you share some of your experience similar to what Rafael's family was undergoing when you visited the island immediately in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike, for the invitation. And I'm really pleased to have followed 3 fantastic women. I agree with you that women, we hold our women really highly regarded, and frequently women are the leaders and the CEOs of our family. And so I'm going to come back to that CEO discussion about leadership pretty soon. I think Puerto Ricans are perplexed by the way that we have been treated individually and collectively by the Trump administration, and by the lack of empathy and leadership that has been displayed. We are proud U.S. citizens by birthright since 1917. When we move from Puerto Rico and come to the U.S., we come stateside. We don't come to another country. When somebody who lives in the U.S. moves to Puerto Rico, they don't become expats. They're still pats. They still live in their country. So it's very important for people to understand that we're one country, and even though we have one foot in the island and one foot in the mainland, and we can go between languages and cultures, we feel ourselves interwoven into the American story and the American culture. I think that 3.1 Americans live in Puerto Rico, 3.1 Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico, and 5.8 are in the mainland. So there's a lot of people that have roots in Puerto Rico that travel freely and cross cultures and cross barriers very easily. There's 30,000 active military troops that are Puerto Rican right now. And as we have spoken in the past, we are part of the military, and more than 300,000 Puerto Ricans have had uniform, including my father, who was a veteran of the Korean War. So our way of being was really affected by, first of all, a natural disaster that caused trauma, emotional and physical trauma, and death. And then by an grievance, which was the lack of empathy, the lack of respect that we expected a CEO to deliver to us. So any Puerto Rican woman would have done a fantastic job in listening, being empathetic, providing consoling people, providing hope, and correcting if there's an error that happens. All of that is in our toolkit as Hispanics. We know conflict, we know how to deal with our complex families, but we also know how to take care of each other, just like we have done during the COVID, disaster, and the way that Puerto Ricans felt that the overwhelming support from the Latin American community for the island. So when I went to Puerto Rico, I encountered, it was 4 months after the disaster, we were in the recovery mode, and I found a group of fantastic people from all forms of government that were volunteering in Puerto Rico for a recovery function. What I did not encounter was a level of executive leadership that I would have expected from somebody in the leadership capacity of an executive.
Let me play off of that thematic a little bit about leadership and direction, especially as it relates to the White House and how it views our, I hate to even say this because it's so obvious, but our fellow American citizens in Puerto Rico. But back in July, the New York Times reported that former DHS acting secretary Elaine Duke said in an interview that President Trump considered selling Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria hit. Can you talk about your reaction, Dr. First, when you heard that was actually emanating from the White House?
Well, it added to the physical trauma that we were all feeling after the lack of response. And what has happened after that, and because these stories, they're adding emotional trauma. This is moral injury that is being added on the physical trauma that we have all suffered, as Puerto Ricans, and actually as Latin Americans, because we all are in this. One of the great things about being Latin America, that we have this collective belonging. And so I hear these stories about what happens in the border, and I'm affected. And so everybody's affected by this moral injury. And then moral injury happens because of loss of respect, because of abandonment, and because of sense of betrayal. And moral injury and physical trauma are both traumatic events that lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. And I feel like as a people, we have collective PTSD. And so adding insult to injury is not helpful. Adding, the image of the paper being thrown to us, it is such a morally injurious image, and it keeps happening. And then we get, sort of like a, story like this, that they could, as if it was possible to sell a piece of U.S., of U.S. with citizens in them. I said that was possible. It's just a lack of emotional intelligence, executive capacity, and it just grieves us even more. So it's clearly not helpful to us as people and as individuals, but it's just an added injury that we keep, bearing.
Thank you for that. I do also want to bring up perhaps another one of those pieces of trauma, unfortunately, but I think it does speak to the broader narrative of how this administration is treating the Puerto Rican community. Earlier this month, the White House announced a $13 billion aid package for Puerto Rico. Can you talk, Rafael, about the timing of that announcement? This was money that was supposed to be directed to rebuilding after the hurricane the hurricane destruction that happened 3 years ago.
Mike, I'm so glad you brought that up because indeed, coincidentally, in the midst of very bad concerning poll numbers in states like Florida and Pennsylvania, other states where the Puerto Rican vote makes a major impact, in the 11th hour, President Trump announces this aid package that frankly was 3 years overdue as it relates to, the trauma and all the horrible conditions that Puerto Ricans on the island immediately faced right after Hurricane Maria and subsequently after the terrible earthquakes in the southern part of the island. And it just speaks to this lack of respect. And I recall thinking about, President Reagan when he once uttered trust, but verify. Puerto Ricans are such a warm community and want to believe better with our leaders and our neighbors. And it's just clear that this money, we're very skeptical will ever be at the island. But even if it eventually reaches the island, 3 years of trauma, as the doctor stated, 3 years of mass migration from the island, 3 years of schools closing, mental health challenges, family separations, and ongoing issues with the resettlement communities throughout the diaspora. So it's just another example of empty rhetoric and continued disrespect to the Puerto Rican community.
Rafael and Dr. De La Cruz, I want to thank you both for joining with us tonight and sharing the experiences of our Puerto Rican brothers and sisters. Please join us, stick around a little bit longer if you can. If you've got to go, again, I know it's busy, but we'll probably be talking a little bit more about Puerto Rico, and your insights would be certainly helpful and appreciated. I want to switch now to talk a little bit about our veterans and those that have served our country. I want to focus on Latinos in the armed forces. And to get us started with this discussion, let's take a look at what some Latino veterans had to say about Donald Trump.
My name is Arturo Escobar, Air Force Sergeant, served 23 years and retired with the U.S. Air Force.
My name is Maria España Morales. I'm retired from the Air Force after 21 and a half years of service.
My name is Charlie Urbina Jones. I served the United States military from 1970 to 1972. My last place of duty, I was deployed to Phu Bai, Vietnam.
Since the American Revolution, Latinos have served with pride in the U.S. military. Tens of thousands of immigrants have earned their citizenship through service. As soldiers and veterans, Latinos have fought and died for our country, earning more medals of honor than any other group. They and their Latino families are at the heart of the American experience and our freedom.
If you look at the names engraved on war memorials, you will find countless Latino names. In fact, thousands of Latino names.
Brave young patriots who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country.
And what are we veterans getting in return from our Commander-in-Chief? Insults and disrespect.
We have a message for you, Donald Trump.
While you dodged military service and got 5 deferments,
we were serving.
You called our veterans losers and suckers because they weren't in it for money or power. They were in it for duty, honor, and for service of our great country.
Now we find, Donald Trump, you chose not to stop at an American cemetery at the graves of our 10,000 brave brothers and sisters who are buried there.
You chose not to speak for fear of messing up your hair in the rain.
Are you kidding me?
There's good reason veterans and Latino veterans are abandoning Trump. Over the last 4 years, you abandoned them.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
With me now are two remarkable people. The first I'm going to introduce is Manuel Supervielle, a 26-year veteran of the U.S. Army, where he is a lawyer and colonel. He represented the U.S. military and our government around the globe in 45 nations, serving with U.S. PACOM, U.S. Southcom, and U.S. CENTCOM. He currently serves as a founding partner with Veritas Assurance Partners, a defense industry consulting firm. And with him is John Leguizamo, or Johnny Legs, as we call him, an actor, director, and fervent activist for Latino rights, who is currently heading up the Latino History for Morons project. If you haven't heard from Johnny Legs yet, he's going to give us a quick history lesson. But before he does, I do want to mention, I had no idea that Latinos were anything other than Dodgers fans, Johnny. You might want to explain that as part of your history lesson.
Yo, I'm on the East Coast, so and I'm from Queens, so I got to represent my Mets.
Talk to us. Give us a little bit of background. What's going on here? Put all of this in perspective, all this nonsense.
All right,
all this
but
chaos.
first, I got to give props to the women here tonight, because you saw the power of Latin women. And it's not by chance, because Latin women are the #1 creators of small businesses in America at 87%. So much love to y'all, and you inspire me. Well, what I wanted to say a little bit before I start was watching that shit show last night, Trump's debating. It was so painful, because how do I explain that to my children, that the president of the United States couldn't denounce white supremacists, QAnon, and Proud Boys, and cut the program that helped people understand racism in schools and in businesses. He got rid of that program. How do I explain that to my children? And he's the denigration of Mexican Americans, the way he treated Puerto Ricans, American citizens in Puerto Rico, let 4,000 American citizens die in Puerto Rico. I feel that we're so vulnerable in so many ways because of him. The El Paso tragedy that Janet brought up, and Pulse in Miami, the 50 LGBTQ that were assassinated, the majority of them were Latinx. He makes us vulnerable. That's why I'm going to tell you why we Latin people have a superpower, and why being Latin is a superpower. Okay? And I'm going to do it like Latin history for short attention spans, because I know we're running late. But we Latin people have fought in every single war America has ever had. We're the most awarded minority in each and every single war America's ever had. Think about that. And in American Revolutionary War, we were 10,000 unknown Latino patriots out of a total of 80,000 troops. That means that we Latinx were 1 in 8. Think about the amount of contribution to this country. And Juan de Marais, Cuban, was a friend of Washington, and Washington asked him, "Hey, can you go to Cuba and bring us citrus fruits?" I don't know how George Washington talked, because I wasn't there.
So how'd you know what his voice sounded like, Johnny?
I'm sure I'm right on. And he said, "Bring me money." Juan de Marais went to Cuba and brought money to the patriots. Cuban women in Virginia sold their jewelry to feed the patriots. And Galvez, Bernardo Galvez, had an army of 3,000 Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Mexican Americans, natives, and freed slaves, and they kicked the British out of the South so they couldn't trap the New England Patriots. I'm talking about not the football team. I'm talking about the Minutemen and George Washington. And in the Civil War, 20,000 of us fought in the North and South. I mean, you know how we do. We'll go wherever they pay us. And it's unfortunate, but true. And there were we had a lot of officers. We had incredible officers that got the Medal of Honor from Abraham Lincoln, Felipe Bazar from Chile, Augusto Rodriguez, Puerto Rican. The first admiral in America was David Farragut. In World War I, 120,000 of us fought with incredible amounts of heroes. We had Marcel Cerna, who while injured and being shot at, protected his platoon and killed 24 Germans. Nick Lucero, who blew up 2 of the biggest gun nests in Germany while maintaining fire on the Germans and got a Purple Heart in La Croix de la Guerre. I almost hurt myself saying that. And in World War II, 500,000 of us fought, man. And another incredible amounts of great heroes that we never heard of. Gabby Gabaldoni was 19 years old from East LA, Mexican kid, captured 1,000 Japanese soldiers by himself. And Gil Bosques, Mexican American, saved 40,000 Jews in France by renting churches and putting 20,000 in each, and then gave them asylum in Mexico. I mean, he's bigger. This is bigger than Schindler's List. Where's our Brown Schindler List? You know what I mean? Our contributions are so massive. And we survived. You know, we didn't just get here. We've been here for 500 years. We found it, discovered, built this country. The British took it from us, and then the Americans took the Southwest. But before that, we were the greatest empires the world has ever seen. The Aztec, the Maya, the Inca, the Comanche, the Apache. And then we continued building. Even though we faced so much oppression, so much of our power is taken from us, so much of our land is taken from us. From 1830 to 1930, 6,000 Latin people were lynched, burned alive, and shot to take away their land, their homes, their ranches, their political power. Then in the 1930s, Woodrow Wilson created the Repatriation Act. And for the first time in American history, American citizens who were born here were deported, 1 million of them. Never done to anybody else. And we still survived, and we're still here. And we have great activists and great inventors and great athletes. And we contribute $2.3 trillion to the US economy every year. If we were our own country, we'd be the 8th largest economy in the world, the 3rd most powerful state in America. So we continue to contribute to this country in so many ways. And if we can put all this information out there in history textbooks and movies, or you spread the word, then we get our power back. And then Americans can't demonize us. Americans have to respect us. We're not the weak ones anymore. We're the contributors, the builders, the founding fathers of this country. And that's how we get our power back.
Johnny, that's special and fantastic. I mean, all of us have heard these stories about service from our communities for so many years. I've never heard it articulated just that way with that specificity going all the way back. There's no question that Latinos are run through the very fabric of this country from the very first days. So I do want to transition a little bit to somebody who has served, right? Somebody else on your panel to talk a little bit about the Trump administration and the article that we are all familiar with earlier this month that ran in the Atlantic that reported that Trump repeatedly disparaged the intelligence of service members. Asked military veterans to be kept out of military parades, and even called Americans who died in war losers and suckers. Manuel, can you speak a little bit about what that means to those who have served, particularly Latinos who have served, when you heard those words?
Yeah, Mike, first of all, I wanted to thank you and Marco for the invitation to join you all. And it's really quite humbling to be with this panel of famous people, and following somebody like Johnny is, I think, going to be a pretty tough thing to do. That particular question, that particular comment by the president obviously was very hurtful. But then again, he doesn't use that just for veterans and just for Latinos. He pretty much uses that for everybody. Because that's how he sees the world. I would rather not spend too much time on that, Mike. And what I'd rather do is to first a little bit of context. Is like I said, everybody else here is pretty well known. I'm originally from Cuba. I was born in Cuba, left when I was very young. My mom had the foresight to get me out when in 1961. And we ultimately settled in South Texas. And so I was raised in South Texas. I went to high school in Laredo on the border. I studied in Saltillo, Mexico, and Monterrey. I know northern Mexico as well as South Texas. And so I feel very blessed because I have both my Cuban heritage, of which I'm very proud of, as well as my Mexican heritage, of which I'm also proud. And to Maria's point previously, and Johnny brought it up as well, my friends in Laredo would say to me, we never crossed the border crossed us. My family's been here for 350 years. So that's something that I think oftentimes gets left behind. I went to college in San Antonio. So, I'm a South Texas product, basically, with Cuban roots. And I joined the Army because I felt like I had an obligation to serve a period of time, not an entire career, I didn't have that in mind, but a period of time as payback for the fact that this country took me in as a refugee with literally refugee status, and I wanted to serve. So I joined the Army, got my commission as an armor officer, went to law school at University of Texas, and then transferred to the JAG Corps, the Judge Advocates, the lawyers. And I spent the next 27 years on active duty doing that. And during that time, as you said before, I traveled to 47 different countries representing the United States, dealt with very senior people from Bangladesh to Madagascar, from Iraq and Afghanistan to Chile, Argentina, and the Philippines, and many, many other places in between. So I come at this situation that our nation faces right now, not exclusively as a Latino, although I can relate to that, but as someone who has been throughout all of Asia, Latin America, and a good part of Central Asia. And what my message would be to the folks that are listening here, and I live in Miami, where there are a lot of immigrants from South and Central America, as well as the Caribbean. Many of them are either first generation or second generation immigrants, people who left their home nations seeking a better life, not just economically, but actually they were either fleeing a strong nationalist military dictatorship in the 50s and 60s and 70s, or they were fleeing communist ideologues in later decades. What they all have in common is that they were fleeing dictatorships. Mm-hmm. And that's the point. It doesn't really matter whether the dictatorship has a little flag that says I'm a communist or a little flag that says I'm a fascist. The point is they are dictatorships. And that's why they came here looking for freedom, looking for opportunity, like my mom brought me out. And my message to the Latinos, particularly here in South Florida, regardless of what your background is or what country you came from or how many generations ago you came or decades ago, your opinion, we should be debating. That debate last night should have been about the environment. It should have been should be about the economy and jobs, racial equality. It should have been. But what this election is really about is that they don't care about your opinion. So what you need is to get to the point where you understand that in this election, it's not about policies, it's not about politics. At the end of the day, is the American experiment of a government by the people and for the people going to survive? And I'll finish with this, Mike. I swore to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, throughout 27 years of active duty wearing a uniform. Now that I'm a civilian, and I have been for the last 12 years, I'm going to continue to defend the Constitution by voting. And I would urge everybody else to get out there and vote, because that is how you defend the constitutional principles that have been shredded by an administration that has had a relentless and brutal attack on the institutions. And for those people who say, oh, all politicians are the same, I'm just going to check out, I don't care, that is just simply not the case. In our history, to Johnny's point where he was talking about going back in history, in our history, we have never had any president at any time that has had a relentless attack on the institutions of the United States of America and the principles of the Constitution that we swore to defend.
Powerfully said, and thank you so much. We're going to show a quick video right now about service. So let's go ahead and run that tape.
Hi, I'm Kirk Acevedo. I'm one of 60+ million Latinos here in the United States. Did you know 32 million of us are eligible voters? Now that means we are uniquely positioned to hold the results of this presidential election in our hands. For the last 4 years, we had a president treat Latinos like second-class citizens. Our Latino children of hardworking people are separated from their parents and put in cages. The staggering death rate among our communities from COVID is the highest in the country. Remember when Donald Trump called our Mexican brothers and sisters rapists and criminals? Remember when Donald Trump wanted to sell Puerto Rico? I do. This is how Donald Trump treats Latinos in this country. It didn't matter that we're Americans. He wanted to sell us. I'll be casting my vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in honor of my grandmother, Hipólita Bingochea Parras. She came from Puerto Rico to New York City to raise her family. Unlike Donald Trump, one of my brothers served his country and fought in Iraq. My other two brothers are in law enforcement. We're not murderers or rapists, and we pay our taxes. Don't be swayed by this con man, the teller of more than 20,000 lies since he took office, the taker of over 200,000 lives due to gross negligent handling of the coronavirus. No more Trump, the teller of lies. No more Trump, the taker of lives. No más. Let's make America great for all Americans, not just the white ones. Vote Joe Biden.
That was powerful.
Johnny, powerful stuff, brother. And I know, look, you and I have talked before, and I know that you've got brothers that have served just like Kirk's. Talk to me about what that means, having family that served.
Well, you know, I came here when I was 3 years old from Latin America, from Colombia, and I'm Colombian Puerto Rican. You know, watching Kirk go on about, you know, the problems that we're having right now is so deep. I have huge respect for the military. I have great respect for good cops, you know. I mean, not all of them are good, and there's some bad ones, and everybody, we need to be accountable. That's why Black Lives Matter means so much to me. You know, I want to speak on a subject. You know, I don't know if anybody heard that podcast about one of the producers on The Apprentice who had an NDA and then went bankrupt, so he doesn't care if Trump sues him. So he started speaking out of class, and he started saying that, you know, Trump said a lot of racist things, but among the things that stood out to him the most was how Trump would say how he hated Puerto Ricans. And then when you see him, the way he treated everybody in Puerto Rico after Maria and the other hurricanes, you see that wasn't a lie. And it, you know, and it enrages me to a level of my blood boils when I think of the mistreatment of all those American citizens in Puerto Rico. And I know that Trump is micro-targeting Latinos now through WhatsApp, through our own radio stations. Like in Florida, he's going through Caracol to talk to Colombians, and he says that Biden is a socialist, and if you vote for him, he's going to turn Colombia to like Venezuela, and don't mail in your ballots because they'll get lost and your vote won't count. Then in Arizona, they're targeting through WhatsApp and telling Mexican Americans that Joe Biden is going to steal the Virgin Mary, and the same thing about votes. So, you know, that's why I'm here with all my Latino brothers and sisters, because we need to speak out. We need to be vocal. We need to act. Democracy is not a spectator sport. You know, if you don't defend it, it doesn't exist. Our Constitution it's not a natural law. It's an agreement that we agree to follow. But once you stop agreeing, it's just a piece of paper. It's gone. It disappears. So that's why we need to vote for Joe Biden, because we got to save democracy, protect Latin people. Joe Biden is going to create a museum. He's working on getting the Smithsonian Museum for Latin people for our contributions and to celebrate our history in this country. He's working to get small jobs, making sure that we can create more businesses, especially after COVID. I come from a neighborhood called Jackson Heights in Queens, which is the hardest hit in New York City of deaths and infections of COVID. Why? Because as Rosario and Janet and Maria said, we are the essential workers. We're the first responders, and you know, we have to go there. So that's why I'm begging everybody to register to vote. I know Puerto Ricans are the largest group in Florida, and I know some of them are afraid to vote because they don't want to register outside of Puerto Rico and lose their emotional ties to the island. But this is the time to let that go. Register in Florida, vote for him, and then you can go back and register in Florida and Puerto Rico again. But this is the time to protect the island.
Again, powerfully said. Thank you, Johnny. We appreciate that. Manuel, talk to us, if you wouldn't mind, for a couple minutes about what it's meant as a Latino to serve in the U.S. military, and if there are any specific challenges to what that means, your service?
You know, I'll be honest with you, Mike. The military, the U.S. military, is one of the leaders in cultural integration throughout history in terms of, you know, whether it's Black or Hispanics. I mean, Johnny gave this whole very excellent presentation about Hispanics making up 1 out of every 8 soldiers in the Revolutionary War. My maternal grandfather, a poor kid from Pinal del Rio province in Cuba, volunteered to fight in World War I at a time when there were not enough volunteers in the United States, which is why they had to grant citizenship to the Puerto Ricans, you know, at that time. And so it's the same feeling of tradition. Now, I will tell you this, my single most powerful, emotional, positive experience in the military, I was the senior judge advocate, the senior lawyer for all coalition and U.S. forces in Afghanistan in 2005 and 2006. The U.S. ambassador had been asked to officiate over a naturalization ceremony. And he said, you know, you are a naturalized citizen. I think it would mean more to them if you officiate. And it was the single biggest honor, bar none. I mean, forget about the medals and everything else. It was the single most important thing, honor that I had, was to go to this mess hall at Camp Phoenix in Kabul. And we had about 30 soldiers from all over the world, including 2 Cubans, I might add, who were becoming citizens. And I was able to talk to them, and they were not just there. These 30 guys and women were not there alone. Their platoons were there. Their squads were there. And so you ended up with we had about 300 people there who were all cheering. And so I gave my little talk and everything and told them about the importance of this. And as each and every one of them came up to receive their certificate of citizenship, here we are in Kabul, Afghanistan, at a camp where everybody is armed. I mean, everybody's walking up there on the stage with their rifle or pistol or whatever, machine gun, whatever, getting their certificate of citizenship. And their platoon or their squad would cheer them and holler and scream and carry on for each and every one of those. I mean, it just gives me chills just even remembering that experience. But that's the kind of thing. And that was back in 2005 at a time that here in the United States, they were having very strong debates about immigration and Latinos in particular. And I'm thinking, here I am in Kabul making these people citizens, and back home, they're all squabbling over immigration. I hope that kind of answers your question, Mike.
No, it absolutely does. And those unique perspectives, I think, add to the richness of what we provide, what we offer when we serve in the armed forces. And I want to thank you for your service, and thank you for 40 plus years of commitments to this country. I want to thank both of you for your time. Manuel, Johnny, we're moving on in the agenda, but thank you guys for making the time to visit with us and give those perspectives for those that have served. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you, John.
I want to turn now to a celebrity video that we're going to show with people who could not make it tonight, but wanted to say a few words.
People of America, I am Jose Andres, and thank you for joining us here tonight. At a time when so many of our fellow Americans are struggling, looking for work, mourning the loss of loved ones, and yes, wondering where their next meal may come from, we must come together to build back better.
This is without a doubt one of the most important elections in American history.
And if you haven't registered to vote, please do so right now.
This year, the Latino will hold a difference in who becomes president of the United States of America. So vote. Our voice is very important.
Our communities, the Latino community, deserve a president capable of living with empathy and decency to restore the soul of America.
Remember that the chaos we are living through right now is all under Trump's watch.
Beginning with his lack of response to Hurricane Maria, to efforts to repeal DACA.
Remember that Trump called Mexicans rapists, threw paper towels at Puerto Rican Americans during Hurricane Maria, separated family and put kids in cages.
And failing to protect those who are dying at disproportionately high rates due to the COVID-19 virus,
which has resulted in over 200,000 American lives lost.
The current occupant of the Oval Office is incapable and unqualified. He's failed the Latino community at every turn.
And I know some of you say, well, he's done the economy well. Really? How's that working out for us right now? Huh? I know who it is working out for, the very rich.
We don't choose what crisis might strike, but we do choose the leaders who respond, and the choice is so clear.
I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. I hope that you'll do the same. He's the only person that'll get us past what's going on in this country, both politically and medically.
Vote for Joe Biden. This is a decent man who cares about us and cares about this nation.
The Biden-Harris plan for recovery for Puerto Rico, just like their plan for the entire United States, will restore the promise of opportunity on which our great country was founded.
You know that our minority or our demographic is the economical engine of this country, and we alone can decide the outcome of this election.
I need you to do two important things. First, make sure you are registered and have a plan to vote. Then, talk to your family, your friends, your neighbors, and encourage all of them to do the same.
Our minority has the ability, it has the power to decide the outcome of this election.
We cannot afford 4 more years of this.
The stakes have never been higher, especially for the Latino community.
Please go to the polls, mail in your ballot, and vote blue.
So please, I encourage all of my brothers and my sisters from the Latinx community, Latinos, Latinas, to please register and please vote so you can decide the right course that this country needs to take.
We have the power to determine the outcome of this election.
So please, vote for Joe Biden, and if you're Latino, think about it. There's no other choice.
There is only 35 days until the election, and across the country, millions of Americans are voting already. So there is no time to waste.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And take care and stay safe.
Thank you for joining me. God bless you, and God bless America.
We're getting down to it, folks. There's only 35 days until the most historic election in all of our lifetimes. And as we began this discussion, I want to reiterate the fact that it is the Latino community, Latino vote that could be decisive in Florida and Texas and in Arizona. So with that, we're going to talk with our final panel, panel number 4, with 2 very exceptional political operatives who know how to actually turn out the vote and will offer us some advice on what we can do as volunteers, as professionals, as activists, and as concerned people in the community. Hector Sanchez, the Executive Director and CEO of Mi Familia Vota, a Senior Fellow at the the GW Cisneros Hispanic Leadership Institute and Chair Emeritus of the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, joins us along with Chuck Rocha, who has served on the board of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute and the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, and as a fellow for the Center for National Policy. He's also the founder of Nuestro PAC. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for the invitation.
Let me start with you, Hector, in mentioning that there are over 60 million Latinos in the U.S. and over 30 million Latino voters across the country. Talk to us briefly, an overview of what impact Latino voters will have here in the 2020 election, just 35 days away.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to repeat some of the amazing arguments that some of my colleagues already made, but there is something that I want to emphasize, the historical element of this conversation. This is what democracy is all about. Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I happen to run one of the most progressive organizations in the history of the community and our nation. And I'm so excited to be here shoulder to shoulder with Republicans, really reflecting in how important this conversation is, because this is about the soul of our nation. This is about our democracy. We have not another chance. We already saw for 4 years what this person in the White House can do to our society, to our economy, promoting hate and violence from the White House, etc. What else do we need to witness to really understand that this person is the worst thing that could happen to our nation? So this is a cry for democracy. This is a cry to put a stop to this extremism, to this violence. But at the same time, it's an element to reflect on the political power. Times of challenges represent times of opportunities. And this is a unique opportunity for the Latino community to really gain the political power that historically has been taken away from us. Everybody talks about the Latino vote, but nobody really talks about the historical lack of investment in the Latino community on anything related to democracy. We know in Mi Familia Vota that when we invest, when we knock on doors, when we make calls, when we send texts, when we do social media, when we talk to people mostly, that people in the Latino community come out to vote in historical numbers. We have seen that. Right now, we came out to the field 3 weeks ago with the highest level of protection, health and safety, PPE, etc. And we're breaking record numbers when it comes to voter registration. People are responding more than ever at the doors, obviously with the important distance. The same is happening at the phones, etc. So the point is, we are responding as a community. Let's take this to the finish line. Let's keep working. But I want to say something. This is so important for us and Mi Familia Vota, that we build the most aggressive campaign in the history of the organization and in our community that is called #BastaTrump. It has all the different elements of an infrastructure in a campaign. We're targeting 2.5 million ambivalent, that's how they call it. We call it voters that have been historically ignored. And we are touching each one of them 7 times to the phone, in the doors, through social media, sending mail, etc., making sure that everybody participates. The important element that I want to also mention is we need to make a plan to vote. We have almost 1,000 people now looking here watching this. Each one of us can make a big difference. We know that one of the best elements in which we can create impact is working with your families. Pick up the phone, commit to talk to 10 people, your cousins, abuelita, tios, etc. Ask them if they registered to vote, how to vote early, how to vote by mail, how to vote in person, and what are the safest way to do it. But the point is, this is a call to action. Everybody together, the more Republicans, Democrats, Independent, super progressives like myself, or more conservatives like some of my amazing colleagues here. This is a call to save our democracy. Muchísimas gracias.
Hector, real quickly, before we move over to Chuck, I want to ask, how can people get in touch with Mi Familia Vota? What's the best way to contact you, to volunteer, to get engaged, and to do their part to help with your efforts?
We have ground operations. We have 14 offices in 6 states, and we have ground operations in Florida, in Texas, Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, and California. And we extended our digital operations to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The best way to reach out to us is through social media. We have a very aggressive social media space, but we also launch a 1-800 line that we are serving full-time and staff full-time. Is 1-833-VOTAMOS. And we're responding to any of the questions about the issues. It can be citizenship, it can be voter registration, early voting, census, anything that you want to know about civic participation. We are here to help. And obviously at mifamiliavota.org.
Hector, muchísimas gracias for all of your work and everything that you're doing, brother. I think you're going to make a difference with 6 field offices and thousands of people engaged. That's exactly what we're going to need to make the difference in this election. I'm going to move to Chuck Rocha, who has become like a brother to me over the past few months. We don't agree on probably a whole lot, except for we share a passionate distaste for the current occupant of the White House. And I have to say, just as a professional, the respect and the admiration I have for Chuck is unlike any other operative, Latino operative in this country. His ability to move and turn out voters is legendary. And Chuck, I want you to give kind of an overview, as Hector did, the two of you, the work that you're doing combined is going to move mountains. So talk to me a little bit about the state of the race and where we're at and the difference that Latinos are going to make and what Nuestro PAC is doing to make a difference here, brother.
Thank you, Mike, and I appreciate it. It's so good to see all of my friends. And for all of you at home who've been wondering about this left-right thing, I definitely represent the Mexican redneck left. I also ran Bernie Sanders' campaign. If you believe me and Mike Madrid would be on the same call or the same video a year ago, I'd have told you all y'all were crazy as hell. But I am proud to be here and now have as much respect for Mike as he has for me. I told a reporter today, and he goes, they called me and they were like, Chuck, you have been beating the you-know-what out of Republicans for 30 years. What are you and Mike Madrid doing on the same Zoom call? I said, look, me and Mike want the same thing for our community. We have two different opinions on how we get there, but we can't start that debate until we get rid of the current occupant of the White House, and that's what this call is about. So much love to my brother Mike. I'll go on the record and say that. And to my friends, my clients, Maria, Janet, all of the people here, you should know I also own a consulting firm called Solidarity. So I work for Hector, I work for Janet, I do work for Maria. I do a lot of work around here because it's one job, and that is to get rid of the occupant of the White House. And I'm honored to have started Nuestro PAC because what we were missing in the Latino community is much like what we were missing in the white community with the Lincoln Project, was somebody to call somebody out to task in a very partisan angle. Janet Munguia, Unidos, Mi Familia, Latino Victory, LULAC, there's a bunch of amazing groups that are doing amazing work in the community, building infrastructure there. Unidos has been in Florida, has been in Miami, have been in Orlando, knocking on doors year round for years. I don't want to replace that. They do the best job in Florida doing that work. But what they needed was somebody at 30,000 feet dumping air bombs on the top of the president in Spanish and English with TV, radio, digital, mail. And that's what I'm doing, the same thing as the Lincoln Project, and now, as you all know, partnering with them to do some of that information. And where we are today in this is we're down to the very end. It's the closing few innings, and voter registration ends in all of these states in 4 or 5 days. And now we have to turn out this vote that is not motivated to turn out. They're not motivated to vote for Joe Biden. They're motivated because they hate Donald Trump, but we have to close the deal. We have to be the validator for Joe Biden. They already know they don't like Donald Trump, but they look to us. They look to Unidos. They look to Nuestro PAC. They look to Lincoln Project, because we put real people on TV or at their doors or on their phone saying, here's why we must vote for Joe Biden and get rid of Donald Trump. Joe Biden may not be perfect, but we can hold him to account a lot easier than we can the crazy man that's currently in the White House. And let's start there. Then me and Mike Madrid can go back to running campaigns against each other and talking about the policy differences and having that debate in the community with Latinos. I look forward to that debate every day, but we can't even have that debate right now because of what's going on. That's why it's so unique of what you're seeing here on this Zoom call. A lot of you who just figured out what the Lincoln Project was, or who Unidos was, or what Nuestro PAC is, thinks this happens all the time. This don't happen all the time. This is very, very special for us all to come together, the left and right, to do that. And the Latino vote will make a difference with 138,000 newly registered Latinos in Arizona. As many Puerto Ricans as there are Cubans in Florida. With this emerging class of Latinos in North Carolina that are coming of age and way more progressive than you can think of. 55,763 households that are Latino in Michigan. I know these numbers because we've been sending mail to them, digital ads to them, radio commercials to them, and TV commercials to them. While on the ground, groups like Unidos have been knocking on their door, calling them on the phone, sending them text messages, along with Mi Familia Vota and other groups. This is how we all come together here at the end. But right now, we can't let up, and we need to continue to push. There's going to be more nonsense on the TV, like that crazy debacle of a debate last night, more noise every day from somebody else who wrote a book, by the way. I wrote a book. You should buy my book too. Anyway, the fourth piece is that we all got to show up and vote, and we got to get our friends and neighbors to vote. And Mike, you are uglier on Zoom than you are on Twitter, and I'm super, super honored to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chuck. Appreciate the confidence and the compliments. Talk to me real quick though before we go back. I got some questions for Hector, but first, Chuck, what states are you in? Where's the vote going to make a difference? And most importantly, how can people get a hold of Nuestro PAC to help out? What can they do?
Look, the only thing you can do to Nuestro PAC is write a check. That's what we need. We need money. And one PAC that I've talked to Mike about and what Hector was eating around the edges of, the top 10 white super PACs on the Democratic side by the end of July had raised $500 million. On the Latino side, there's only 3 big super PACs, and I'm one of the 3, and we had only raised $5 million. So that's $500 million compared to $5 million. There's one thing that Unidos, Mi Familia Vota, Latino Victory, Nuestro PAC all have in common is that they were underfunded. So I'm currently in Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. We are the largest super PAC on the Democratic side for Latinos, and I have raised and spent $7.5 million. There needs to be so much more done. If you want to volunteer and knock on doors or do phone calls or do texting, go to the UnidosUS Action Fund website and sign up. Go to the Mi Familia website and sign up. But right now we're wanting people to sign up so we can get them tied into groups who have infrastructure on the ground. Nuestro PAC is not in the job of having infrastructure on the ground. We're going to make TV ads and make Donald Trump's skin crawl. If you want to be making phone calls, you need to go to UnidosUS Action Funds and groups like that that are doing the work in the community, who've been there forever doing that work, who have an infrastructure. So it's that grassroots level with the Lincoln Project and Nuestro PAC on the top. That's the perfect formula on how we win this thing.
We've got one more video to show everybody. So let's go ahead and roll that tape.
Happy birthday.
You come far, took many roads, lived through so much joy, and sometimes heartbreak.
Trump's supporting your illegal cousins today.
But you never stop wanting and dreaming and fighting until those dreams came true. You've achieved what many think impossible. Have what others only imagine.
Congratulations, you are now a citizen of the United States.
Haven't you worked enough, suffered enough, sacrificed enough for a better life, for freedom, for your dreams? But the work is not over yet.
These aren't people. These are animals.
This is a country where we speak English.
You must protect what you've worked so hard to earn.
We have so much power. We have to get out there and vote.
Go out, register, and vote.
Because we are the difference.
I want to vote for every person who cannot.
We voted.
Register and vote. Make sure your voice is heard. To learn more about why your vote matters, go to mifamiliavota.org.
Very important, everybody, mifamilia.org. If you're still with us, and I apologize for running a little bit over, but we had an all-star cast of folks, I think, that can help us make a difference in this election. That's a great website, mifamiliavotes.org. You've got a bevy of information on people to go to, and I think we tried to bring a cast of people who can be difference makers in this election to give you the assets and the resources where you can play a part in the next 35 days. I stress again the importance of the wide variety of people that we've brought together to have this discussion with you tonight. People that I have been working against for the better part of 30 years have become friends and allies, because the threats to the community and the threats to our country is so very real. The actions and the activities that we take in the course of the next 35 days are going to determine the history that we make over the next 35 years. I implore you, I beg you to please get involved. I thank you in advance for the work that you will do, the commitments that you will make, the contributions that you will make. Every minute matters now. The most valuable asset that you have in any campaign is time, and time is running short. Every hour you contribute, every precinct you walk, every phone call you make, every postcard you write will determine the outcome of this election. I want to thank everybody, friends and allies and previous enemies, for coming together and demonstrating the commitment that when a threat exists to our country and to our people, that we can all work together. I want to thank the other founders of the Lincoln Project for being supportive of this and making this happen. And I want to close tonight by again saying thank you and showing you one final Lincoln Project ad. Thank you and good night.
It's going to be only America first.
When Donald Trump was elected president, Latinos expected a seat at the table.
There was no seat. Trump's careless and callous mishandling of the coronavirus has killed 3 times more Latinos than any other group.
Our loved ones continue to die alone and separated from their families. Hundreds of thousands more Latinos have lost their jobs, their homes, their businesses, as America leads the world in cases and deaths.
Trump's mishandling of immigrant children and their parents is heartless.
Trump's insults and disrespect for Latinos are out there for all to hear.
These aren't people. These are animals.
They're bringing crime. It's like an invasion.
Now something historic is happening.
For the first time, Latino Republicans, Independents, and Democrats are uniting under one banner, Unidos contra Trump.
United against Trump.
We unite because we know that together we can make sure this madman is not reelected.
I'm a Republican, and I've had it with Trump.
As a Democrat, I want Joe Biden.
We're all Unidos contra Trump.
Unidos contra Trump.
Unidos contra Trump.
Unidos contra Trump.
We are all going to vote for our community.
Nuestra familia.
For our country.
No le demos nuestro voto a un racista.
Vamos a votar por Biden.
We're all voting for Biden.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
I am a pretty man. Thank you, Mike. I got to go to bed. It's damn late.
Go to bed. Go to bed.
Mike, thank you so much. This was incredible. The
really
ads
great.
that you all are doing are phenomenal, for real.
Thank you for making the time to stick around, Maria. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank
you
all.
for watching. Thank
30
you.
for my 35 days. Let's take this to the finish line. We're almost there.
I can't wait to hear from you guys again.
Buenas noches. Yeah, the campaign.
Whatever you need.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Pleasure meeting everybody.
Ciao, ciao.